Okay, we're live. Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast. I'm Chris Garner, joined with my co-host for today, Tayte in the Hour and Tom Woods. And today we'll be giving our review on the latest installment in the rebooted Star Trek franchise, Star Trek Beyond. This is going to be an interesting one because we've talked a little bit about it, not really in depth, but I think we're going to have an argument for this one. I think this one's going to get really heated, but we're going to have a good time with it. So, as always with our reviews, we always give a spoiler-free and a spoiler section, but we'll warn you when we get to the spoilers. So I think we should really kick off with just our thoughts on Star Trek in general and this new rebooted franchise. So if either of you want to kick us off, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, Tate, you can go first.
So I've never actually watched a single episode of Star Trek in my life. If you watch the Battle of the Brackets, I actually stood up for Tom saying that was actually a pretty cool TV moment. I hadn't actually seen the series at all. I just said that moment was pretty cool. Now, I went back and watched the previous two films before going to see this film, obviously, because I wanted some context. And I really liked it. As far as a modern take on a sci-fi franchise, I thought it was action-packed. I thought it had great suspenseful moments, had good characters. Now, I know that this is kind of based off the original characters and all, but they really have reinvented itself, because I always, like, from what I've seen of Star Trek, I haven't seen like full episodes, but I've seen clips of it. It's very different, and it's taking it in a new direction, and I feel like this direction, because I haven't been used to seeing the older episodes, I quite like it. It really does suit me for a casual, I'd say, fan who's liked these last two films going into this film. So I was pretty excited about this film. I thought, okay, there's quite a lot that could be done here.
Tom?
My opinions are I've watched pretty much everything Star Trek, from the first incarnation of the original series up to the very awful Star Trek Enterprise TV show that got cancelled, through all the films, from the old original cast films, which some were really good, others were really shit, let's just say. And I mean, my thoughts, I love Star Trek, but my thoughts on the first reboot movie, I hated it. And the sequel, Into Darkness, I liked. I saw it with you, Chris.
Yeah,
I liked it when I watched it, but going back and thinking about it, it's awful. It really is.
You turncoat.
I am a turncoat. Call me a turncoat.
You adored that movie when we got out of that film.
Yeah, but it's just, looking back at it now, it's just rubbish. The only good thing is the characters, the banter between the characters.
Mm.
Benedict Cumberbatch was awful in that movie. Awful.
I'm kind of on the same light spectrum with you, Tate, on this one, in terms of that I've never watched a single Star Trek episode in my life. It's not my thing. I'm sure it's great, but it's just something I've never gravitated towards. I was always very much, as a kid, a Star Wars guy, and that's lasted pretty much all my life. I know some people like both, and some people fall very much on one side, and that's kind of for me with Star Wars, really. But I remember in 2009 when this rebooted Star Trek was coming out with J.J. Abrams directing, and the trailers came out. They had the classic Two Steps from Hell epic music that always plays in trailers, and it got my attention. Went to see it, and like you, Tom, I really, really didn't like it. It didn't bring me into the franchise as much as I wanted it to. I kind of had the same apathy towards the TV show and just Star Trek in general when I went to see that. However, this all changed when I went to the cinema with you, Tom. We went to see Into Darkness when it first came out, and it was like this whole life-changing experience where I absolutely adored that movie. It was like I said this on all my reactions for the previous Star Trek Beyond trailers, it was like they'd Star Wars Star Trek. They definitely made it relevant again, brought it more to the forefront for a general modern movie-going audience. It was a space action movie, and I get why hardcore fans of the TV show don't like this new franchise as much, because it is mostly focusing on the action. But I loved Into Darkness. I agree with people's thoughts that the ending, the whole third act, kind of falls apart. It is very much a retread, recreation, remake of the ending of Wrath of Khan, and I can understand why that would annoy a lot of people. But after watching that, I then went back to the 2009 one, and I had like this whole new appreciation for it. It was almost like my same thoughts on Captain America. After I went to see Winter Soldier, I went back to the original and liked it a whole lot more. So with this one, Star Trek Beyond, this was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, actually. Sort of what you were saying, Tate, or Tom, about the whole banter between the characters. That has been consistent within all of these movies, and I would say that this one here, Star Trek Beyond, is probably the best example of that. Really, the credit to this franchise and this reboot are the cast of characters they've got and how they work off each other. And especially Simon Pegg writing this one, I think this is definitely very different to the other two that have come out. That's down to the writing with Simon Pegg and with the new director, I would say, Justin Lin. It very much is a continuation of the other ones and fits in with them, but it is noticeably different in style, I would say.
It is noticeably different in style, but it's different because I feel like the Star Trek films were quite Star Warsy, and maybe that was my appeal to them. When I was watching them, I was like, yeah, I can really get into this. But with this latest film, it does, I'm not gonna lie, it does feel a bit more like a Fast and Furious film. I've never actually seen Fast and Furious, but I know what they are like.
Yeah.
I've had friends comment on them, and it was kind of very similar reactions to what I got from this film. I went with a massive Fast and Furious fan, and he was like, oh yeah, this is kind of like the action they have in those films. So,
incoherent and unwatchable is what I'd say.
But anyway, it's difficult to tell because I quite liked the previous films, and there are moments of this film which I seriously enjoyed. And there was like a couple of moments where I was like, getting a bit sidetracked here. I can understand where the direction went, maybe the writing went. I definitely have a favorite moment from this film, which was my favorite moment from the new kind of incarnation of Star Trek, which I kind of predicted. As soon as they mentioned a certain event taking place, I was like, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know anything about Star Trek, and I was like, yeah, they're going to do this, and they did it quite well in the end. So.
Well, I think we should go into the plot more of this one, and then we'll sort of go through our initial opinions and the plot and the characters and everything like that. So, Tate, with the trusty IMDb, sporting a very fashionable new black exterior for some reason, do you want to give us the synopsis of Star Trek Beyond?
I don't know why, but it's just on Star Trek Beyond that it's doing this black exterior thing.
It's like space.
But anyway,
I don't know.
The USS Enterprise crew explores the furthest reaches of space furthest reaches of uncharted space.
There you go.
Where they encounter a new ruthless enemy who put them and everything the Federation stands for to the test.
Yes, and this is sort of the logical... Well, I think this is how all the films go, right? It's like, oh, someone comes along that is against the Federation and wants to destroy it, and then it kind of all plays out, but it's... As I said, the strength of this film is with the crew and the interaction. The plot, for me... I won't say get sidetracked, because there is definitely like a clear-cut plot in this one, and I did enjoy it a lot, but when this isn't... I'm jumping ahead a little bit now, and it's not really a spoiler because you see it from the trailer, but when they get down on the planet, to me, just like the pace of it, the tone of it, and sort of how the landscapes were made, it really did remind me of like the TV show. Like, you know, you had like a couple of characters paired off with each other here and there. It really got to work on their character relationships and things like that, and it was pairing up characters we'd never seen before in this franchise. I mean, the first one was very much just like a crew-based thing. The second one, I would say, the focus was more on Spock and Kirk. In this one, you know, you get like Bones with Spock. You know, you get a Chekhov with Kirk and things like that. So I liked that they split it up more. We kind of got to see more of these characters that we perhaps didn't get as much time with in the previous ones.
Yeah, I think what works in its favour is that those interactions between characters, and like it is funny banter they have between especially Spock and McCoy are very like they're very humorous. I think where it falls apart for me is it has a very big pacing problem when they hit the planet, and for me it felt very slow up until like the action climax, and I don't know, some of the things Some of the characters I didn't much care for. I thought the new introduction of various characters kind of was they were a bit bland. I don't know. It just to me it felt it was Fast and Furious in space, and if I'm talking about how it was directed for a minute, it was incoherent. The action was just in a complete mess. You couldn't see. I felt like I was just being tortured. My eyes were just being tortured with different, loads of different cuts, and you couldn't see what was going on. But I will say, it does look good. The planet does look good.
Yeah.
Especially the Yorktown, the big space station, which was in the trailers. That is very reminiscent of Inception.
Really,
but it does look very good. I mean, I like the visual design of it. I don't want to hate on this movie too much because I did like it, but as a Star Trek film, it's just not. It's not a Star Trek film. It is just a schlock popcorn action film.
I think
just
it falls into some of those categories where some of the films are considered to be good films, but they're not good films in respect to their own franchise.
Yeah.
And I can't think of an example off the spot, but that would be Star Wars Force Awakens, maybe. Or maybe not. But films which are good in its own right, but maybe don't fit into the franchise very well. Personally, for me, the direction, without spoiling anything, there are a lot of jump cuts made to look like it's fluid, like they go into like a circular object on the middle of the screen, they cut to another circular object on the middle of the screen, then pan out again. It just doesn't look clean.
No.
In Star Wars, they always have that wipe that goes across the screen, which it's an easy way to cut across the screen. It's really clean. Everyone knows it's going to happen every single scene. It's fine. With Star Trek in the previous films, it's been quite nicely fluidly done between scenes. In this one, it was really janky, or it felt like it was cutting the pace every single time it changed scene instead of just letting it slide along nicely. That was something I personally picked up on. As far as the action was directed, I think it was an okay job. Maybe not for a Star Trek film, because from the previous films, the action was... It felt like I was watching like a TV show brought into the film, but like not in a bad way, but in a good way. Like it felt homely. It really did. Whilst watching this new film, it felt like, oh yes, go over the top with all the action and stuff like that, which I don't think is the Star Trek approach. I think that's the Star Wars approach. Star Wars approach is throw everything at it, throw everything you've got. As far as I'm aware, the Star Trek approach is we got to think of the most logical way of getting around this, which is what the characters reflect.
Well, we've got to remember as well that when the original TV series came out, that had like hardly any budget. So I'm sure if it did have the budget of, say, this film per episode, they would have all this incredible space action. But because of the limitations at the time,
who wouldn't? That's like saying any film wouldn't. That's like saying if an indie film had millions of dollars, it would have like high expensive action sequences and stuff like that.
Yeah,
no, it doesn't mean
my
that.
point is when people argue that this isn't Star Trek because it's not like the pace of the original, I think that's an unfair comment because with the limitations at the time, of course they couldn't have all these big action sequences.
Chris, would you like to see a machine gun chase scene in space set in Ex Machina if it had been given more money?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No, you would not. That would completely destroy the film. And I'm not saying that this destroys the film, but what I'm saying is it doesn't suit it perfectly.
I'm going to say if you took out like the big bombastic action sequences of this film would be boring as fuck. If
it wouldn't.
Chris, it would probably be very loyal to the old franchise, and it would probably be getting higher reviews across the board.
Okay, then let's go with that.
As far as general reviews are concerned, people are watching this as an action spectacle because people are watching the Fast and Furious films.
I'm getting so wrong about that. Can I add a point about that?
Star Trek...
No.
Yeah,
go on.
Chris.
Go ahead.
Okay. Get rid of the action scenes out of it then. Tom, you were mentioning about the pacing, and I will agree with that completely. Like, this isn't a perfect film, and I thought the film was fantastic up until the point they got to the planet, and then it did feel like the drag chute had been let out, and it did really slow down. But that's kind of what Star Trek was, right? It was about like discovering new planets and like political things on a planet. So if you just had that as the movie where they're on this planet discovering it with the character relations, and it's kind of the entire second act of this movie stretched out over an entire film, it would be, as you just said, it would be boring, it would be plodding, there would be nothing happening. It would be people walking around on a planet. You said the second act was slow and boring with not much happening, but that's what the entire film would be like.
Because the pace at the start was very frenetic, and then it just gets to the planet, and then it just sort of, because the pace at the start was very quick. It was, but with it in terms of it being if you're going with it's like the old films or the old TV show, right? The TV shows were very much about exploration. They had a sort of villain of the week type situation where they'd have a problem they still need to resolve each episode, but you'd have the exploration, you'd have the sort of humanity, you'd have the character banter, but there would still be that overarching problem. Now with this, it is just bombastic action, shoot everything at anyone, and I just don't know. I mean, it's fine.
May I?
Go on.
Yeah.
I have never seen Star Trek before. I'm going to keep repeating that, but I would have rather seen the film that Tom is saying right now. I would have rather have seen a film which was them crash landing on a planet because of some unknown problem, exploration, finding the villain, finding out they're evil, finding out their power, finding out their backstory,
that was
meeting
this
back
movie.
up together.
It wasn't.
That was this
No,
movie.
the movie
Everything
was.
you just said there is
the
in the
movie
movie.
was shoot, shoot, bang, bang, calm, calm, shoot, shoot, bang, bang. That's what the movie was. And Chris, I would have rather have seen, okay, slow build-up start, build it up, build it up, build it up, big finale, instead of having it janking all over the place.
I don't think it janked. As I said, like the second act did slow, but every like story beat you just said was what happened in this movie. Like crash landing on a planet, and I don't want to give too much away because we're in spoiler free, but the whole crash landing on a planet, exploration, discovering the villain's evil plan, and dealing with
what evil plan was that? It was so just stereotypical.
Well, we can't go into specifics. We can't go into. Whoa. We can't go into that just yet. But I will agree. If we're going to get into the characters more now, when I did hear Idris Elba was cast as the villain, I was excited as hell because Idris motherfucking Elba. Okay, that guy is a legend. He's a fantastic actor. And when we saw him in the trailer, he's like decked out in all this makeup. Kind of looks like the Uruk-hai from Lord of the Rings. I was hyped. I thought he looked fantastic. And he's okay in the movie, but I was very much
generic.
down by it. I think, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but when you get to the end of the movie, although it's weird, like I got back from this film and there's a TV spot and it gave away like that whole ending, like the stuff on the video screen at the end, it was in a TV spot, so I have no idea what they're doing with that. But I think that by the time you discover his plan, I think it's a little bit left too late in the film. It's kind of very much like Venomed in Spider-Man 3. I think that if they'd have established that earlier on in the film, I think you could have really built up his character. Kind of like with Khan in the second one, like he announces his identity about just like at the end of the first act, and then you really get time to flesh it out and what his stake is and what his motive is. And I think that they should have stuck to that formula for this character, because on the surface he is a very interesting character, and I would have liked to have seen more development for him.
Okay, I'd say the villain.
Kroll, I think his name. Kroll, was it?
Yeah, Kroll. He was just so so boring. Like I'll talk about bland characters. You're just his villain logic was just non-existent. And I really didn't like his villain at all. Like it was one of the weakest points of the movie for me. And I just think that was a big letdown, because it is Idris Elba, and like it should be very good. I mean, he was fine in the role, but the actual character itself was boring.
He was very stock villain.
I'd say that's based upon the writing, because I feel like given the material, we all know that he would be able to perform. And in this film, he wasn't really given much material to perform with. This isn't really spoiling it, but he probably has less than 50 lines in the entire film. Probably.
And you couldn't understand some of them. Like, my God.
Yeah, he was putting on a very sort of strange accent, dialect to the way he was speaking. If I'm going to compare him to any villain, he was kind of like Azog for me in the Hobbit movies, where it's very just stock. You know, they show up every few scenes, deliver a line of dialogue. It was almost like Malekith as well from Thor: The Dark World. They cut to him periodically, and he just says like a villainous sentence, and then it will cut back to the rest of the story, which surprises me as well because Simon Pegg was writing this one, and as I said, this is probably the funniest one out of all of them so far, and the character interaction, you could really tell that Pegg had written this one. It definitely had his style of humour. So it surprises me when we do get to the villain and we don't get much material with him. It was even getting to the point for me where I thought we weren't going to get anything at all, and I was watching it and thinking that I really want to get attached to this villain and understand him. And it wasn't until like the last 10 minutes where you even get a shred of character, and at that time it was a little bit too late for me. It's a shame because Idris Elba is a phenomenal talent, but I thought that all the rest of the performances were equally as solid, if not more so than all the other films. Chris Pine in this one, I would say, also doesn't get as much to do as the previous films, certainly in terms of his character. I remember seeing the trailer for this, and it shows a flashback to the first Star Trek film, 2009, with his father and the talk where it says, you know, you need to take up your father's mantle, and you get a little bit of that in this film. But again, I think that could have been developed, and I'm not sure if it was the actual story itself which didn't lend itself well to a thematic tie-in to his character. I'm not railing against the film or anything, but that was just me. I think that he had a stronger character in the previous two films, certainly the first one, and even in the second one as well with his interaction with Spock.
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that because you've gotten attached to these characters and you've sort of seen them develop, I didn't think they kind of had anywhere to go with in terms of character development with Kirk that much. Because in the previous two films he's always said it's kind of always been the sort of standard, oh, my dad joined, so I got to live up to him, and it was kind of the same thing in this. It's just rehashing old character ideas and character development, and it's, I don't know, it just kind of didn't have the similar themes in it than the previous two, in terms of in terms, for example, like when into, I was about to call it Wrath of Khan, but it's not. It's Into Darkness.
It's Wrath of Khan. Let's be honest.
It's Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
It's a bloody worst movie.
It's Star Trek 2 Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you had the idea of Kirk going against what he actually believes in, to have justification in murdering, like some bloke that would potentially start a huge cataclysmic war, and he soon comes to realise that throughout the film and backs off against his original idea. And I thought that was quite good character, but you just don't get much of that in this. Really, I don't think.
In this film, because it's such, I have to say, this film is reasonably generic, that we would have liked to have seen old school kind of Star Trek generic, even though I've never seen Star Trek again. But like, there was not much material to work with, I assume, and I don't think Kirk's character could really go much further in this own film. And it was a good development for all of the other characters. It was nice to see that Anton Yelchin had a good amount of screen time in that film. It was good to see that Bones was given more screen time, because he was probably the funniest person on screen throughout the entire film.
Carl Urban's great.
It was funny seeing Scotty getting a lot of screen time, because obviously Simon Pegg was writing.
Yeah, but that accent, man.
It was also that is a bad accent. But, it was also good to see. I like the character of Jayla.
Yeah.
I quite liked her. I think there's more to develop there. There's a lot more to go on there. I'm not sure if this is a spoiler or not, but I'm quite surprised that the Admiral's daughter, who was in Star Trek Into Darkness, wasn't in this film.
That's a
I was
good
really
point,
surprised about that.
But we've got to be aware as well that this is 3 years after, isn't it? This is 3 years into the 5-year mission.
Still, she was building up to be quite a big character on that ship, especially as she showed her loyalty to Kirk.
She showed a whole lot of stuff in that movie, let's be honest.
Oh, actually, one point I'd like to raise, which is kind of, I suppose, deteriorated my viewing experience of the film, was the news that they've commissioned a fourth fourth Star Trek reboot before I'd even seen the third one. So all form of tension, I think, was kind of lost on me because of that news.
They said in the interview they did for that they were 3 years into their mission in this film, and they've got, I think they said they were going to have 2 more films, which would be one at the end of the mission and then one post-mission.
Well, for me, like what you were talking about there with the whole just shattering of any kind of tension, that was already kind of shattered for me at the end of Into Darkness. Spoiler alert for Into Darkness, anyone who hasn't seen it, but where Kirk dies at the end.
God,
and
that was horrible.
I thought they played that scene fantastically, and if they'd stuck to their guns on that, I guess this third one would have been like Search for Kirk instead of Search for Spock. But
can't leave anything worse.
Yeah, he's immediately resurrected within like 10 minutes, if that, with some kind of magical Deus Ex Machina that they've referred to previously in the movie. And that kind of ruined it for me. Like I will say that although I loved Into Darkness, the third act really did suffer. So in terms of how this is structured and in terms of it sticking to character, I think it does a much better job, especially with the character of Spock. There's no scene of him jumping on like Coruscant spaceships and having a fist fight with Kirk at the end. There's none of that. Everything feels in line with all the characters, I would say. It's just a shame that I would have liked to have seen more character growth for people, especially with the character of Uhura. She's hardly in this film. I definitely think she's been more prominent in the first film, even the second one when she goes down on the planet with them to the, not the Vulcans, oh my god, my lack of, what are they called, the Dreadlocks? Klingons, that's it. God, someone's going to bitch at me in the comments there.
I'm going to bitch at you now.
when they go down to Klingon, I mean, she's sort of the envoy, she's the messenger, she's still having something to do. In this one, when they all get separated, you kind of go for a long period without seeing her. She really doesn't get up to all that much in this film, and I think that's a shame because I would like to see more of Zoe Saldana's character in this.
I feel
that's really my negative, really.
And Zulu were kind of the 2 people who were the main characters who were left in the camp. I say the other characters went off on their own kind of split adventures, but it was mainly those 2 together. We had Kirk and Chekhov, we had Bones and Spock. So they had some good pairings across the bunch and really kind of displayed the main 8 characters, I would say, of the series. And if they're going to do a next film, I think they're probably going to go off in different pairings, maybe, I don't know. I really don't know where they can go on from here personally, because this was such an action-heavy film. It kind of means the next film is going to go back to possibly the old school roots, and people are going to go, oh, well, this film's boring compared to this film, or they're going to go with the same amount of action, people are going, oh, it's just another generic Star Trek film.
I think we're going to get more character in the next one, because I think Chris Hemsworth has signed up for it, and he obviously played Kirk's dad, so I don't know if that's going to be some kind of weird ghost vision of his father he has, or if it's going to flash back to like moments before the first one. Yeah. Oh, can you imagine if we have Force Kirk? That would be amazing. So yeah, I guess that's. I mean, I have problems with the characters and things like that, but that's probably my biggest one, is that they're all great in it, and the comedy is fantastic, and they hit all the beats of that perfectly, especially Carl Urban as Bones. His interaction with Spock is one of the best things in the film. The screening I went to didn't have many people there, but the guy behind me was loving it, and we were laughing at all the same jokes. I mean, it is a very funny movie. I would have just liked to have seen a little more substance to the characters in terms of tying it into the actual overall story. And I think the material is there to do it with. I just think it was kind of a missed opportunity with the writing or possibly the direction. Shall we talk about the effects for a little bit? Because I know, without giving anything away, I know there's a scene that we all pretty much agree was abysmal CGI in what was otherwise a very visually stunning film, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Is that... Oh, go on.
I think we could... Go on, Tom.
I was going to say, in terms of effects, it is breathtaking, and you think the marvel of visual effects nowadays from sort of the old models of yore, it is very, very, it's very colourful, and I think that was probably one of the things I really liked about sort of especially the opening scene of Into Darkness.
Oh yeah,
was the fact that it was so bright. It was very coloured. It wasn't dark. It wasn't grimy, gritty, or anything. It was just a nice, bright, fun visual look. And I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about this as well. Effects-wise, it is very, very good, and the visual effects guys really do deserve some, like, just a standing about it, because I mean, it is very good.
They will get nominated for this film, I think.
Absolutely,
they'll be up against Star Wars, but they'll do a good job, and especially when I know it was in the trailer, but it was the one moment in the trailer I was like, okay, I need to watch the other two films so I can see this film. It was the moment where they're speeding through space, and the space is just bending around the ship, and you're breathtaking.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to bring that up too, and I want to talk about just the posters for this film as well. Like,
the posters were very good.
I'm looking at one here. It's the Enterprise flying in space. It's got all blue at the top and sort of orange underneath, just the colours and everything. And even the main theatrical one with all the characters. I mean, it's a generic sort of layout for a poster with just all characters' faces everywhere. But again, the use of colour and that scene you just mentioned, Tate, with space bending around it, it is absolutely stunning. There's a few questionable shots, especially with Kirk on a motorbike. It's only like a quick shot. But all the space action I thought was handled brilliantly, and also. Although they don't really use models all that much now, especially for this film, one thing I will say is that I've noticed in this film more than the other two are like the creature designs and the costumes. There are some really creative-looking aliens in this film. If we're going to go back to like Idris Elba, I thought the makeup on him was fantastic, and I can't even imagine how many hours he would have had to have been in makeup for that. Probably, if it's like Lord of the Rings, like 9 or 10 hours, something ridiculous like that. But even like the occasional ones you'll see cropping up around the ship, or on the planet's surface and things like that, I just thought it was brilliant. Even the character of Jayla as well, I really liked her look, and I thought she played it very well. Just looking at the Sophia, Butella, she played Giselle in Kingsman. I thought she was fantastic in the film as well.
See, want to sort of go back to sort of the visual design of sort of the posters as well, which was kind of something that got me really hyped about sort of going to see this. Was one poster in particular, which was you have Jayla in the middle, Kirk and Spock either side, and it's sort of orange and blue and white. It's very reminiscent of old Star Trek posters, and that's what I thought going into this. Oh, this looks really good. It looks like it will harken back to old Star Trek films. But you know, my opinion on it is established. But yeah, it's such a great film to look at, and probably one of my most enjoyable, like, sort of, in terms of its visual design, was very, very good to watch.
Thing is, though, no matter how many times I say it, Avatar was a crap film, but the visuals were just breathtaking.
Yeah.
Does that sometimes take away from the film itself?
And I mean, I do think this film struck a balance. I mean, you're probably sick of me hearing about striking that balance between practical and CGI, but I never really had a problem in this movie. When they're on the planet's surface, there's a lot of sets that are built, there's a lot of structures that are built, and it looks great, it looks fantastic. It's not like a Star Wars prequel thing where everything's on a green screen. There is some tangible things that the characters can interact with, and that's nice to see. But then obviously for your big space action, that's where the visual effects really come into it. You see it in the trailers, but the things we like, the swarms of the little things piercing the ship, was fantastic to watch, and I'll go into it much more in spoilers, but that was probably my favourite scene of the movie, was that which ultimately leads them to them landing on the planet. Can we talk about the music in this one as well?
Yes.
Michael Giacchino is without a doubt one of the most outstanding modern composers, I would say. And he also has a talent for coming onto projects that have been orchestrated by previous composers in the past, and he's very, very good at utilising old themes, reworking them into new ones, and making them feel in place with the score. He did that for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, he did it for Jurassic World, and he's done it for this as well. And there's a lot of people talking that they want him to take over after John Williams either sadly passes away or if he retires from doing music for the Star Wars franchise. And again, it's another solid score from him in this one. When that main theme kicks in, get goosebumps every time. It's a fantastic main theme. And going back to that scene you were talking about where they go to the spaceport, and it's this fantastic establishing shot. I thought the soundtrack there too was really, really nice. I love the score. Michael Giacchino's the man, and Yeah.
Other than those two tracks, or the main theme and that track in particular, I didn't. It was much the same as the music in Force Awakens. It was just a bit nothing for me. I didn't feel it was particularly very good. To be honest, I didn't really notice there was a score in it until, like, obviously the main theme at the beginning. That piece of music when they head into the Yorktown. But I don't know. It wasn't standout. I don't think.
It wasn't a standout score, however, it did suit the film quite well when I was listening to it.
Yeah.
So I was listening to it whilst the film was going on, and it was good. I quite liked it.
It's sort of like peaked in and out for me. Like, as I said, like the bit where they go to Yorktown, that was where it really kicked in for me, or any moment where the Enterprise blasts off and the main theme kicks in, and then it would kind of dip out a bit. I don't know. Maybe this will be a soundtrack when I listen to it on its own. I'll appreciate it a lot more, but it did work for the film. I can't really remember anything from Into Darkness. I remember that really, really nice piano piece in that like whole montage at the start of Into Darkness with that worker who plants the bomb in the headquarters. God, it's been a while since I watched. Do you know the scene I'm talking about from Into Darkness? The piece of music there was really nice. So I guess we'll go into positives and negatives, because I think the crux of this review will really come into when we get into spoilers. We can talk a lot more about it in detail. So positive and negative from both of you and your overall recommendation, and then we'll head into spoilers.
Positives, the action I quite liked in some areas. I'd say that it was visually stunning, and I'd say it's probably the funniest of the Star Trek films, like, out of the three that I've seen. Negatives, it's got nowhere else to go, I don't think. This film series, really, I'm finding it very difficult to think of where else they can go now, because this was like a big finale kind of series of events. The pacing, obviously, was one of the probably biggest downfalls, but I definitely say you should watch this film, especially if you've seen the previous ones. You obviously have to. But yeah, it was good, but there was still a lot of flaws to it.
I liked it, and I don't want to sound like broke a record and downbeat, or like just hating on this film, because I did enjoy it. I just have my problems with it, and I mean, if you're going on the basis of its, if you're going on the basis that the character banter is probably the most memorable thing about it, and it is a reason to go and watch it, and I don't know, I have my problems, but I did like it. I don't want to like say I didn't, because that wouldn't be true. I did, but I do have problems. I do recommend going to watch it, because you will be getting, like, I suppose, in some ways, enjoyable action. Even though I didn't think it was particularly great, some other people might enjoy it. If you're going for a proper Star Trek movie of old, this isn't going to be it. But like I said, I don't want to hate it, because that wouldn't be true. I did like it.
For me, it's kind of a mash of your 2 points, really. With these new Star Trek films, I know what I'm getting in for every time. I think that it was probably the best way they could have rebooted the franchise to appeal to as mass audience as they do. I just go and see these films. They're fun, entertaining space adventure flicks. And I know, Tom, if anyone's like a big hardcore fan of Star Trek, I get why that might not appeal to you if you're used to the old style and you appreciate that old style more. Completely understand that, because boy, has that happened to me with franchises before. But I don't know, I think the talent behind it, the cast they have, the character interactions, as you just mentioned, is probably the strongest in this film than we've ever had in any of the other previous reboots. I think the action, I love the action personally in this film. I thought the way it was staged, the way it was shot, I really, really enjoyed it. Negatives to me, though, I would have liked a slightly more involved story for the characters to be a part of, especially with Kirk, especially with your main players, and I would have liked to have seen the villain, Idris Elba's character, a lot more fleshed out. He gets a lot of sort of backstory towards the end, and I think if they'd have established that more towards the start of the film, you really could have developed and had a really, really iconic, cool villain. That being said, it's a gorgeous film. I would absolutely recommend seeing this on the big screen, not just for the sound, but the visuals we've talked about are absolutely stunning. There's many scenes in this film where it is like you're watching a moving painting. It is absolutely amazing to watch. And I had a great time. I was smiling ear to ear the whole film. The credits hit, and I had a fantastic time, and I can't wait for the fourth one. Hopefully we don't have to wait as long as we had to between Into Darkness and this one. But
when was Into Darkness? 2012.
Was it 2012? 2013. Oh, okay, it's been 3 years, I guess, is the norm. It was even longer, sorry, between Star Trek 2000.
Yeah, for the first one.
I guess it's ultimately going to depend how much this makes at the box office. That's like with any film. So far, it's made just under 60 million on a budget of 185. I think it's definitely going to make its money back. But you know, in the upcoming weeks, we've got Finding Dory coming out for us in the UK. You know, there's Jason Bourne, there's Suicide Squad. So there's a lot of big films coming out. But I don't want people to not go and see this movie. I think this movie absolutely deserves to be watched. I had fun with it, and that's all I can say. That's what I go to the movies for. I want to be entertained. I want to have a good time, and this movie absolutely did it for me. So that's the spoiler-free section out of the way. We'll move into spoilers now. We'll go much more into detail into it and sort of flesh things out a bit more. So should we kick off where the movie kicks us off with these weird CGI rabbit creatures?
Yeah.
For me, this scene, when it started off, I'm not going to lie, I was like, oh god, this is like going to be the George Lucasification of the Star Trek reboot franchise. It was very much trying to piggyback off how Into Darkness started, where it's like a Bond opening, like a cold opening, where it throws you into this action scene or this event taking place, which doesn't really have any relevance to the rest of the plot. I think it worked a lot better in Into Darkness.
It did kind of have probably more relevance than the previous film, because in this film they introduced the weapon.
Yeah, I guess so. But when I saw those talking rabbit things and then they were all pouncing over Kirk, I was like, oh no, please don't say it's going to be this kind of movie. But you know, they quickly get that out of the way.
Shuffle along, yeah.
And then it picks up with the star date whenever, and I think they could have just started the film there, to be honest, like just have the opening title straight to Kirk's voiceover. But
then you wouldn't have got any context as to what he was talking about with the difficulties of being in deep space.
I think there's a different way you could show it than cartoon rabbits.
See, I mean, it wasn't a good scene in terms of the openings to previous Star Treks, but I enjoyed it for the fact that it was getting into realms of dipping into old Star Trek in terms of its sort of, they go in, it's a bit political, not overly so, because I mean the old Star Treks weren't overly political, but they had that essence of you've got to form new factions, new treaties with other races, and I quite like that about it. But yeah, it just does descend into a cartoon, and when I first saw the weird creatures, I was like, okay.
But you know, as soon as that scene ends, the entire first act of this film is probably my favourite chunk of the whole movie, probably right up until they crash land on the planet. And I did think we were going to get a lot of
Enterprise destruction was amazing, I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the
Enterprise
bit
destruction was
before
an amazing sequence.
Even the bit before that as well with Kirk, where he's saying, and I don't know if this was sort of like a subtle reference to the TV show, where he's talking about life in space and how it's become very episodic and it's taking its toll on the crew. People in the crew are forming new relationships. He's trying to have to keep it all together in this 5-year mission they're on, and I loved all that stuff, especially the scene as well where you've got McCoy and Kirk sharing a drink with each other, and they say that they snatched the bottle of scotch from Chekhov's locker. They thought he was going to be a vodka guy because he's Russian, and he says that this my birthday coming up, I will be older than my father was when he passed away in the line of duty. And I thought that was a really awesome character moment that could have been established more. But really, that for me was where the characterization really just stopped for everyone right after that scene.
So Chris, did you want this film to be Star Trek free, Kirk's birthday? But Kirk's big birthday
Kind of.
surprise.
Well,
Where
that's
the Star
ultimately
Trek
how
hero goes across the galaxy to find exotic gifts to give him for his birthday.
maybe like a side, because there was rumors they want to do
The
a
Star
TV
Trek
show.
holiday special.
Oh God, can you imagine? Can you imagine they celebrate Life Day with these cartoon rabbit characters at the beginning? Oh, but
Oh no, they are doing a new Star Trek TV show, which I'm so looking
cast.
forward to.
Is it with this cast?
No, I don't think
okay.
so. It'll have the Hannibal.
Didn't-
It's got the Hannibal showrunner running it, so it'll be absolutely.
nice.
I'm really, I'm just so looking forward to it.
I heard that Andromeda also got greenlit. If you know about that.
I don't know about that.
Andromeda.
Tom knows about it, but he doesn't like the idea of it.
I mean, it was a pretty shit show to begin with.
But I think we should talk about the Enterprise destruction then, Tate, because oh my God, I know Tommy, you've got a lot of thoughts on the whole concept of the Enterprise destruction.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest though, the length of time they lingered on it and how they built it up, this felt just cataclysmic. This was something the crew had never come into contact with before. They didn't know how to handle it. Kirk, the guy who's always got a plan, to hear him say abandon ship was immense. It was an absolute character change from when he's just like, no, there's always a way out, there's always some way of solving the problem. He had to admit that for the sake of his crew, abandoning ship was the safest thing to do, and I thought it was epic. I thought it was the best way to start this movie, and it really sort of catapults it into a new direction when they crash land on a planet they have no contact with, because all the other times they've really been on the ship for most of the movie, I would say. Obviously they dip down to some planets here and there, but to see them away from that and vulnerable and split up from each other, where they've got to really rely on themselves and the person next to them, that was really fascinating to watch for me, so I loved that whole sequence.
Yeah.
It was a good sequence of the movie. It really was.
I mean, the whole Enterprise destruction thing is just old tat. It's just every movie it happens. But I will agree it was very pleasing to watch. But I just think it's become tiresome. We've seen it in 3 movies now. Just get over it. Just do something else.
See, I didn't go back and watch the other 2. Yeah, which we see at the. It's kind of like X-Men, really, isn't it? When we went to see X-Men Apocalypse, how many times the X-Mansion and the X-Jet get blown up? They always build a new one. See, I didn't rewatch Star Trek 2009 or Into Darkness before this one. I wanted to, and we were going to do a review on it, but I thought we may as well just save our opinions for this one. I didn't remember the Enterprise getting destroyed in the other ones. I remember it crashing into the headquarters at the end of Into Darkness where it lands in the water, but I don't know if that completely destroyed it. So this felt a little bit different to me.
It did get shot to hell.
Destroyed, but it basically it couldn't move. It was like stuck in space.
But no, I thought it was a great scene. Ultimately, though, at the end of the film, if we're going to jump forward a bit, I think they call them bees in the film, which is the swarms that break apart the ship. Ultimately, how they work out how they're going to take down these things.
Oh, for God's sake.
That was where I was getting the Fast and Furious connections and the tone of it, and that really kind of took me out of the movie.
That completely lost me.
May I very quickly? That was not a Star Trek moment, but by God, was that a badass moment.
Oh, no,
I liked that moment a lot, just because it was so off-the-wall cheesy. And this was the scene I was talking about. This was the scene where I was like, oh my God, okay, they're going to use music. They're going to play Sabotage, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're totally going to play Sabotage. And I was just like, oh my God, they're going to play Sabotage. And I started like singing along, headbanging along to it. And that was a fun moment for me at the cinema. That was a fun moment for me at the cinema. As a casual fan, I know it completely does not work with the franchise at all, but to hell with it. That is one of those like moments like where it's just like, okay,
balls
screw
to the wall.
film for a second. I want to see this scene.
Yeah.
Take that scene aside, and that could be its own cinematic short film. That was just, I liked that, but I know that it completely screwed over the rest of the film. Like as far as content goes, They could have easily removed that scene. It still would have been a good film. I liked this scene probably as my favorite scene in the film, but I know it didn't suit the film even slightly. As a solo scene, that was my favorite moment of the film.
I knew it was going to filter into the movie as soon as they established music on a jailer's radio on the planet. I knew they were going to do something with it, and then when they were saying we need some kind of signal to blast through them to disrupt it, I was thinking, oh, don't be music. And then I was thinking back to the original trailer as well, of scenes that we hadn't had, and it's the scene where they play Sabotage by Beastie Boys, and then Kirk goes, oh, good choice, because that's the one he had in the car. I believe it was the song that he had in the car in the first Star Trek film. I'm going to be honest, I fucking detest Beastie Boys, and I hate that song Sabotage so much. So I would have loved it if it was just like, if they found a different way to disrupt it and you just had like a great Giacchino score over the top of it.
Well, classical music. Yeah, sure. They're gonna just straight up play some.
I'm not saying like fucking Beethoven or Mozart or some shit. I just mean have the Star Trek theme play over it as they ride. I guess they were riding the wave, really, weren't they? Of these bees. I don't know that bit. It didn't ruin the movie for me, but I did kind of roll my eyes and go like, "Oh, this feels a little out of place in this film."
Yeah, it was for me dreadful. It took me completely out of the experience. I was like, "Oh no, come on, don't do this, don't, just stop."
Luckily, it didn't last too long, though, did it? It kind of.
Then you had
carry it on.
Then you had it linger on like people's feet as they were tapping away, and it was like very music video-esque, and it was just. I just couldn't believe what I was watching. Really couldn't. I sat there stone-faced at it. I hated it. Hated that moment from it. Hated it.
Are there any other bits of the? We should talk about the ending with the villain as well. But is there anything else you want to talk about throughout the movie?
I'd say that Idris Elba's villain. Okay, the bad acting was fine. Like, well, it wasn't bad acting. The bad kind of setup that he was given. Fine. Up until the point where it was towards the end, it's like, oh, humans are the real villains all along. Really, guys? Come on. I just want to see a alien who has no motive. He's just out to kill some people because he's a bad guy. In the previous two films, they've had ulterior motives.
Yeah.
And, this film is just like, oh, he was a human, he's a soldier, he doesn't know any better. Soldiers aren't dumb. They know how to adapt. That's the main thing about soldiers. It's ridiculous how they managed to make that into his kind of backstory.
Yeah,
it really
weak.
is.
It really was weak.
Really weak.
I mean, you had a weak villain in it, but it was enjoyable for most of it. And I just want to harken back to something we were going to talk about: rubbish CGI in it. That horrible shot on the motorbike was just dreadful.
That one horrible motorbike. I'm putting that down. If we're doing Joke Awards this year, that is going to be the worst CGI of the year award.
I also thought it was a bit shaky as well at the end when they were sort of jumping and free falling into the different current patterns, the gravitational currents around the planet. I thought that was a bit shaky as well. But if we're going to talk about the villain a bit more with Idris Elba, I mean, you go back to Nero in the first Star Trek film, and I think everyone is unanimous in that he was a very bland, weak villain, but the guy had a motive. This is
a dumb motive.
Yeah, this is the equivalent if you have that without the motive for most of the film. I mean, I guess he's more in line with Khan, though, in that both of them are sort of want to save their crew and do everything within the best interest of their crew. And the whole concept of, a Starfleet captain who crash landed on a planet and has been on his own for ages. He could be this awesome, other side of the coin to Kirk, and you could have really set that up, and he could have been a really fascinating villain, but they don't do enough with him. And because it comes so late into the film, in the final climactic act, you're just kind of okay, get on with the action, get to the end of the movie. So I would suggest either, if you're going to give him that backstory and that setup, either do it really early in the movie, or just take it all out at all, and as you said, Tate, just have a standalone, he's just evil because he fucking is, he's an alien who just shows up and just wants to cause trouble. And I was thinking when I was watching it, when I thought they weren't going to give him any backstory at all, and I was thinking, well, this is kind of bad, especially by modern movie standards. But then you think back to like Vader in the original Star Wars film, and that was before Empire or before Return of the Jedi, before he had any kind of fleshed out character.
Hold on, can I question something quickly?
Yeah.
If he is human, and the other people who he's working with know he's human, are they human as well? If not, what life form was he teamed up with? And if that's the case, what was with the ancient writing? Because he's only been there for like 100 years, so what's with the ancient writing? And if that's the case, then what's with the soldiers? Who are the soldiers? What race are they? It all falls apart when you start to think about it.
You mean the people on his side? I thought they were all like
Yeah.
survivors of his crew.
No, they only had 3 survivors, I thought.
Did
They
they
only
say
had 3
that?
survivors of his crew, yeah. So who was the 2 sidekicks? I'm guessing they were his crew, but they never actually said who.
I think they were
It was...
drones, or he said something about they have drones on this like mining thing or whatever. I don't know. I guess it's weird. That's a good point to raise.
They didn't act like drones, did they?
Yeah.
It's just where was the context behind that? It completely falls apart when you think about it.
See, when it was revealed that he was human, I kind of went, oh, because like it's a new alien that we haven't seen before in Star Trek. The look of him was great. The makeup was on point. Was it some kind of
He's just really old, you know.
Yeah, was it some kind of clause in like Idris Elba's contract where it was like, okay, I'll be in your movie, but I don't want to have to sit in makeup for 10 hours a day. Like, I want you to like pull it back as the film goes on.
See, I think you could have done something really interesting with his whole energy. He pulls energy from people, and that could have transformed him from being like this really insane, like wants to destroy everything alien, to actually being more human. Yeah, and you could have done something like that with it, rather than just he's human to begin with, but just changed, and now
it would have been. Hey, they could have even gone with he wants to be human because he knows how savage a race they are, and that could have reflected on humanity's own savage ways. That would have been better.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ingredients are there to give like a really fleshed out villain for this one, and that's kind of what upsets me the most, especially when you get Idris Elba to do it, because I think he could have absolutely have done it. You see him in all of his previous films where he's played any kind of fleshed out character. He's always a great performer, but I just don't think the writing was there for it.
I'm sorry, but his character arc was, I got abandoned on a planet because there was no signal on my phone, therefore I'm going to destroy their entire civilization and race.
Because he thought he was abandoned, yeah. Did any of you guys think he was going to turn good at the end? Because there's kind of that moment where Kirk can't reach the final lever.
Well, the sacrifice. I thought there was a slight moment where for a sacrifice I thought, okay, it'd be cliche, but I'd like it, and then he just brought out, like, he went and grabbed the glass and it's like, oh, so he's just a generic villain then. Okay.
Yeah. When he kind of sees his reflection in the shard of glass, I thought, oh, he's going to have this realization, and as you said, like, cliched, but, you know, he was going to help him with it and maybe die in the process, so he'd kind of be, you know, redeemed at the end. But no, he gets pulled into the thing at the end with the weapon and it blows up. And then we get to the ending, and it was great seeing all the characters together again. We keep talking about the character interactions, but throughout this movie, and it's probably one of the best examples I've seen a film do of this, but how just touching and poignant the dedications were. Mostly throughout the film to Leonard Nimoy, because obviously they filmed the film and Anton Yelchin was still alive and well after the film had finished. But I thought they were absolutely beautifully done, really, really tasteful. And I'm not a Star Trek fan, but I'm obviously a Leonard Nimoy fan and appreciate everything he did for the franchise and in all his other things. And they cropped up about 3 times throughout the film, but each one was just so perfect, I thought.
Yeah.
Especially when you get that photograph at the end of all the original cast. I mean, that got a lot of R's in the audience, and I like when films do that. A lot of films sort of go out of their way to do it and really hit you over the head with it. I thought this was a very nice story-driven way, especially for the character of Spock, where, again, I would have liked more development of this, where he's deciding whether he should stay with the crew or, you know, or whether, I can't remember where it says he would go otherwise. Yeah, that's it. He wants to continue sort of the line of work with that. I thought it was lovely. I thought it was really tastefully done, and especially when you get to the credits as well, and it says in dedication to Leonard Nimoy, and then it comes up for Anton. I mean, I've talked about it in my reaction as well, but it really, really sucks that Anton Yelchin went, especially how young he was and how just tragic he went. But I thought it was really nice. I thought it was a really nice, touching tribute to the characters. But now with the fourth one, it's going to be like, how are they going to write him out? Are they going to just sort of do what they did with the general's daughter?
I personally think they're either going to have him being promoted and moving off, or I don't think they would kill off the character out of taste.
No,
I feel like they've got to mention it somehow and put some sort of dedication. They may start the film with like a tribute to him. You never know. But I think whatever they're going to do is going to be tasteful. It's going to move on. Maybe part of the film is that like he got moved to a different crew, he got promoted. Who knows? And anything could happen.
I think that would probably be the best way to do it. I mean, don't kill the character off out of respect. I could see them doing a similar thing where he leaves them a bottle of the scotch and they all like do a toast to him or something. I think that would be nice, and then you can get on with the rest of the story. You don't need to dwell on it for ages, but I do think they'll do something for him in the next movie. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about in this film that we haven't covered, or do you think we can pretty much wrap this one up?
No, I think that's it. That's it.
Okay, final recommendation for me. I would say go and see it. It's a fun, entertaining movie. If you've seen the other two, you kind of know what tone you're getting in for. Just sit back. It's got some great characters, some great action, and it's a fun 2 hours space adventure. And if you're a Star Wars fan, it's enough to tide you over until December, I would say. I'm going to need to watch the other two back to see how this one lines up for the rest of them, but for me, this one, I would say, it's definitely a lot better than Into Darkness. I'm not quite sure if it's better than the first one. I'm going to have to watch them all again to make up my mind. But yeah, so that'll do it for our review on Star Trek Beyond. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this movie, let us know what you thought of the previous rebooted films, and if you're a Star Trek fan, which is your favourite Star Trek series or film in general. It'd be great to get a conversation going on this one, because there's a lot to talk about with Star Trek. Tom, you'll probably have to help me out on the comments with that one, because you know all your Star Trek a lot more than me. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, we're going to have a BFG review straight after this, so look out for that. I've got to also edit a ridiculous amount of reactions. Comic-Con has been kicking my ass. There's so many new trailers coming out for awesome films, so I'm going to be editing those. I'm also editing the Star Wars Celebration content. I haven't forgotten about it, but because I'm editing it all, I have to kind of just stop what I'm doing on the Star Wars stuff, switch to the reactions, but I will try and get that content out to you this week. And also at the end of this month, on the 31st of July, so not that long away, we have got episode 4 of Timestamp Zero. You can find
exactly 7 days. Ooh.
Yes. The straw poll link is in the description, so please get your votes in for that. Basically, the show is where you get to vote on which film we watch in terms of a commentary. We all sit down, watch the movie. It's great fun. The last few episodes have been brilliant. It's one of my favourite series on our channel. So it's not too late to vote. You've got a week left, so please do get your votes in for that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that's going on. So please do hit subscribe. And until the next video, we guys will see you next time. So thank you for watching.